Hey guys, I'm Jeremy, and today I'll talk about Niagara Falls, which is one of the main tourist attractions near Buffalo, New York. So Niagara Falls is pretty interesting for a couple of reasons. For one thing, there's been a lot of interesting people who have gone over the falls. Of course, a lot of those people have committed suicide, but there's been some people who were daredevils that went over the falls and did, like, either they were in like a tightrope and went over the falls, or they went into a huge barrel and went over the falls. So there's some pretty crazy stories about that. And then it was also an important site because it was one of the first sites where they were able to use an enormous amount of electricity, because Edison had created the DC current, but then Tesla went there and was able to make the AC current so that Buffalo can get a ton of electricity, which is one of the reasons why Buffalo was one of the first cities with lights. And for this reason, there was a lot of interesting ideas that came out of what they could do with all this electricity at that time, but some tragic stories too. Like one guy around this time, William Love, was like, I think part of like the railroad industry or something like that, so he had some money. Maybe not a ton because he did need investors, but his idea was to create a canal that went next to the falls and emptied into Lake Ontario. And part of that was to create enough electricity to like make a model city run on all of this power and stuff like that. He only was able to make like 1.5 miles of the canal before like some investors pulled out, and the governments of the United States and Canada also made agreements that like they didn't want people like diverting the water from the falls and stuff like that. So he ended up having to abandon that. Well, what happened was there was a lot of manufacturing up there because there was so much electricity and stuff. And so about 50 years after that, one of these chemical companies or manufacturing companies that basically was dumping a lot of chemicals into that canal ended up selling it for like $1 or something like that. And so they ended up building a bunch of houses in the 50s there and a school. I think there's like 100 houses and stuff like that. And by like the 70s or so, people started getting sick, and a bunch of kids and families and stuff started getting cancer, and it was a huge deal. Actually, probably one of the reasons why Nixon signed the Environmental Protection Act in '71. I'm pretty sure like this kind of thing that was going on is one of the reasons. So you can look up the Love Canal story, pretty tragic back in the day. So there was also a lot of interesting daredevils. So around the 1800s or so, you had some people that took a tightrope all the way across the falls. I think generally speaking, the majority of people survived those kinds of things because of course they were professionals. Maybe of course like 1 or 2 people did die doing that. But what's even crazier is probably the people going over the falls in barrels or different things. And actually, the first guy did it without a barrel. He just swam over, like jumped off a certain area into the falls. In the earlier 1800s, and then around 1901 was when the first person was actually inside like a wooden barrel, and it was actually a woman who was like 63 years old or something like that. So she got in the barrel and plugged it and went off and actually survived, and it was like big news and stuff then. And then of course it started other people who did that, and the second person to do it was a guy, and he survived as well. But the third guy, he wanted maybe so the barrel didn't keep rolling, so maybe he wanted to keep it in one spot. So he had an anvil in there, and he actually had it attached to his feet. So he got a Darwin Award for that one, because obviously when he slammed against the water at the bottom or whatever, it broke, the anvil ripped through, and of course he was pulled down below, so not the brightest move. And then there was a few other people doing stuff like that, and then a guy died around 1951, and that's when they made it illegal after that. So after that point, you couldn't go and do that anymore legally. Of course, a few people did. There's been a few people went over like with a canoe or a boat. One guy about 20 years ago or so wanted to raise awareness about homeless people, so he went off in a jet ski, and he was supposed to have like a parachute that opened, and it didn't. And so he just, you know, got killed doing that. And a few other pretty crazy stories. One guy ended up going over the Horseshoe Falls and was okay, and then like 15, 16 years later, he was like in a big ball basically, and he went over the American Falls. And to be honest, I mean, you can see the American Falls is super rocky at the bottom. Like, I don't think there's any way anyone could survive if they go off the American side. So that's why almost all of these people in these stories will go off the Horseshoe side, which is the Canadian side. And quite a few people have survived doing that. But there's also been about 5,000 people that have died since 1850 until now. So, of course, the majority of those are suicides, obviously. I think they get about 20 or 30 people a year, so pretty crazy. So anyway, on this day, I figured I'd check out Niagara Falls. I haven't been there in several years, probably, I don't know, 15, maybe even 20 years, I'm not sure. And I also know there's nice hiking near there because everyone just sees the falls. But Niagara Gorge, super pretty. Just basically, if you go downstream a few miles, you've got the whirlpool area, and then you have Devil Falls State Park. So on this day, I went to the Whirlpool State Park, and I actually was hoping to walk down from the bottom of the gorge all the way up to the main falls on the American side, which would have been like, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles. I didn't realize when I went down there that it does dead end. It continues on the other side, but there's a section that's so steep that you can't go all the way through. But if you want to see a cool trail with not too many people that's still super pretty, I would definitely check out that Whirlpool Trail because, you know, it's a decent ways down. You go down about 300 feet or so, down 200 or 300 steps. And then you can kind of walk out not too far from the water. And I mean, the water there is just, you know, obviously going super, super intense. And I don't need to tell you that you should not swim there or let your dog swim there or anything like that. Because, you know, you see in the news, people, I mean, some of them fell in, but some people actually tried swimming. And I mean, of course you'll die. Like, that water is insanely fast moving, and it's a whirlpool because it kind of comes out into a big opening before it goes out to Lake Ontario. So yeah, no swimming there, but great spot to get some views and photos and get away from the crowds. And then you could go up and then just drive another, you know, 10 minutes down the road and find another parking. And then you could see the falls from a couple different sides. You can either go on the right side. They have like kind of an overlook, an area you could walk out so you can get a little better view of the American Falls because you are looking kind of sideways, so you can't really get a super good view. Or you could go up on the other side and you could get some other views on the side there. Or you could go down below. They have Cave of the Winds, and you could kind of go below there. And if you have a rain jacket, you know, you could get kind of hit by the falls there. So some people go down there to do that. And then there's a lot of other ways to see the falls and things to do around there. You've got like helicopter tours. You have the Maid of the Mist, which is kind of the boat that's been there forever, like the slower boat that kind of goes right up to the falls. And then you've got some speed boats that are super fast. That looks pretty fun. Actually, if I had more time, I would have did that. And then there's a bunch of other touristy kind of things around. The Canadian side's generally known as being a little nicer, but the American side of Niagara Falls isn't too bad either. You know, they have a few like touristy things and some places to get some decent food and hang out. But the Canadian side's got a little bit better views and a little bit more to do. They've got some interesting things like Ripley's Believe It or Not, which, you know, used to be super cool, especially when I was a kid. And in there, too, you have a lot of the stories of the people who went over the falls and some of the Daredevils and stuff. So some pretty interesting information there. But definitely a nice trip. You know, it was, you know, like I said, a little touristy and a decent amount of people there, but not too bad. And you know, if you have time and it's not too difficult, you know, check out the Canadian side too. But I would definitely do one of those hikes down in the either at the Devil's Hole Park or in that whirlpool park. It's only about an hour and a half down and back. It's like 3.1 miles or something like that. And that's kind of a cool trip to get a little bit of a nature perspective, because when you're up at the falls, it kind of feels a little bit manufactured or kind of almost fake because there's so much cement and buildings around and stuff like that. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. My channel has a lot of different stuff from my travels around the world, whether hiking or biking, and some of the things over the years I've done, whether I was in the military, commercial fishing in Alaska, or my experience living in China and Taiwan for 15 years, and I was a teacher there and led tours and did all kinds of stuff. So if that stuff's beneficial for you or entertaining, subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers.